let's learn about how we calculate the area of composite shapes. Now, composite shapes are just these weird looking shapes that are made up of smaller, regular 2D shapes that we already know. So looking at this weird shape, if we were trying to calculate the area, we wouldn't try and do it all in one. There's no special magical formula that will do a weird composite shape like this. We have to break it down into smaller parts that we recognize. So for this shape, I would cut it along here. I would break it into two separate shapes, two separate rectangles. So let's do that now. Let's move this part up. There we go, we've cut it. Okay. So now that it's split into two separate rectangles, we just use the formulas that we already know for calculating the area of a rectangle. Our formula for that is area equals base times height. Now remember, when you're working out in your book, you always need to start by writing the formula. So in this case, the base is this one here because the base is the same as up here. So we've got 3 for the base, and then the height is 6. So 3 times 6 is 18, and because it's a 2D shape, we write centimeters squared. So that's for the first triangle. So let me just draw a little arrow. That's for that one. Now for this bigger one that's down here, down the bottom, it's area equals base times height. And yes, I already know that I wrote the formula, but I'm going to do it again because it's a good habit to get into. So the base is 16. The height is 5. So 16 times 5 gives us 80 centimeters squared. And that is for this one here. Okay, now I've got my area of my two separate shapes. What do I do now? That is the question. Now, once I have the area of my two separate shapes, which is 18 for the top one, centimeters squared, and 80 centimeters squared for the bottom one, I'm just going to move them on back together. So I'm going to add the two together. So that gives me 98 centimeters squared. And that's my final outcome. Answer, I mean, a little box. There we go. So we've calculated the area of this first composite shape. Now let's try another one. Now this one here, it looks like a house. In order to break this one up, I would be drawing a line from here to here, breaking it into a triangle up the top and a rectangle down the bottom. Now when we have this over here, this marking over here that says 20 centimeters, what that means is from here, which is the very bottom of the shape, to the very top of the shape is 20 centimeters. So that's going to come in handy when it's time for us to calculate with the triangle. So far we've split it into two shapes. We have a rectangle down the bottom, so let's calculate the area of that rectangle first. So for the rectangle, I'm going to do it inside the rectangle just so that I know which shape I'm working on. So we start with our formula, which is area equals base times height. So my base in this case is 10, so equals 10. My height is 12. That gives me 120 centimeters squared. So there's the first part of our composite shape done. Now what do we have left over? It is a triangle. So now we need to try and figure out the area of this triangle. Now this does have a different formula, as you will hopefully remember. So the area for that is area equals half times base times height. All right. So firstly, we've got to figure out what will be the height, because it doesn't actually give us a measurement for the height. It doesn't have a line going down here telling us how tall this triangle is. However, as I mentioned before, it does give us this 20 centimeters here. So this 20 centimeters here represents the height from the top of the shape to the bottom. Yet over here, it gives us a measurement from the top of the rectangle to the bottom of the rectangle. So if that's 12, but the height of the whole lot is 20, what's left over? Well, I'm glad you asked. It is 8. centimeters. So we're going to use that for our height. Now our base, that's already given to us down here. So it's equals half times 10 times 8. Now thinking back to when we did area of a triangle before, those videos, I mentioned how there's 3 different ways you can do it. My personal preference is to halve the base first. So half of 10 gives me 5. If I can get this pen to work, gives me 5 times 8. So 5 eighths are 40. And then it'll be centimeters squared. So I have the top triangle answer here, and I have the bottom rectangle answer here. Just add them together, which I'll do over here on the side. Let me pick a different color for my pen because multiple colors is great. So my triangle is 40 centimeters squared plus the bottom rectangle, which is 120 centimeters squared, which equals 160 centimeters squared. And there we go, that's our final answer. Cool, let's do one more and then I will leave you to it. So here it's a little bit different. Instead of a composite shape where you're adding multiple shapes together, this one is actually missing a part. So it's a big rectangle that's missing this white section here. So it's like someone has, maybe they've cut out a big piece of orange cardboard and then they've cut a little window in the cardboard. So we want to find out how much orange cardboard is actually here. What's the area of the orange cardboard? But we don't want to include this little window. So instead of adding them together, we're going to be doing something else. So let's get into that. So first we need to break it into 2 separate shapes as we did with the last 2. So if I can get this pen to work again, there we go. All right. So firstly, what is the area of the big rectangle, the big orange one? We write base times height. Always write our formula first. So the base is 11, the height is 7. 11 times 7 is 77. Can't forget my units squared. And that's for the big one. I'm just going to draw an arrow there so that I don't forget which one that's for. Now I'm going to do the square that's inside the little rectangle, the little window that's missing. So for that one, it's the same formula. So it's area equals base times height. So my base, because it's a square, my base is 2. And we can tell that because the markings are along all sides. So my base is 2 and my height is also 2. So 2 times 2 is 4 centimeters squared. That's a terrible looking 4, but anyway, you kind of get the point. And that one is for my missing window. So draw my little arrow. You don't have to do that in your books though, of course. That's just for the purpose of this video. Anyway, so here is my big part and here is my missing window. So instead of adding them together, I'm actually going to be subtracting my window from my big orange cardboard. So minus 4 centimeters squared. Instead of adding, I'm minusing. So that gives me 73 centimeters squared. Oh, oops, my mistake. It's actually meters. It goes to show how important it is to be paying attention to the units. So let me just scribble out the C here and pretend that never happened. Anyway, meters. They're all in meters squared. Anyway, there we go. That's our composite shapes for today.